John Lott, economist, expert on gun matters, and expert on a lot of things, actually. How are you, my friend?
Doing great. Sorry to have to talk to you under these circumstances, but it's good to hear from you.
Well, you know, these circumstances, John, are never-ending at this point. The heavy fist, iron fist of government is pounding daily now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not... Go ahead.
Go ahead. I want to talk to you about a number of these things the president's proposing. First of all, I want the audience and you at the same time, John, to hear what Obama said about universal background checks. Mr. Producer, cut 3 Obama today. Go.
First, it's time for Congress to require a universal background check for anyone trying to buy a gun. The law already requires licensed gun dealers to run background checks, and over the last 14 years, that's kept 1.5 million of the wrong people from getting their hands on a gun. But it's hard to enforce that law when as many as 40% of all gun purchases are conducted without a background check. That's not safe.
All right, let's stop there. 40% of all gun purchases are conducted without a background check. Wow, that sounds scary. What's he talking about, John?
Well, there was a survey done during the Clinton administration of purchases of 251 people who had bought guns in 1993 and 94, and the Clinton administration's conclusion was that about 40% of the sales were not having background checks. But that's not really what they were saying. If you go through their numbers, almost all that 40% are basically inheritances between family members or gifts between family members.
So let's make that clear. Somebody passes away, and among the possessions they leave their firearms.
Right.
Or while they're alive, a father passes on to a son, just an example, a hunting rifle. So that would all count as transactions without background checks, correct?
That's right. And when the President uses the term sales there, I mean, obviously that's misleading because I don't think
No, it's not misleading. It's a flat-out lie. Those aren't sales.
Right.
So that's a flat-out lie. Now, we're not talking about buyers and sellers in that case. We're talking about a family member giving to another family member. Now, I'm just curious, are there statistics on how many crimes are committed by people who inherit weapons or whose family member gives another family member a weapon? Do we keep statistics on that?
No, nobody keeps.
So we have no idea whatsoever if this creates any additional crime or whether it's even a less of a criminal issue, correct?
Right. I mean, people have looked to see whether the Brady Act, which started in February '94, had any...
Now, remind everybody what the Brady Act is.
Right. Well, that's what the President was talking about there. These are background checks where there's a computerized list of names of people who have felony offenses or many types of misdemeanors that prohibit them from going and buying guns, as well as information on mental health background. And if you try to buy a gun, the dealer who's selling it to you will go and call up this database, and they'll check your name. And if somebody who's prohibited has a similar name to yours, then they'll flag it and either try to look at it more over the next 3 days or issue what they call an initial denial, which could take months to clear up.
But he says 1.5 million of the wrong people didn't get guns. It didn't get in their hands. Has the Brady Act in any way reduced murders?
No. But the 1.5 million number is completely bogus in the sense that when he says prohibited them, again, these are just initial denials. About 99.9% of those initial denials end up being dropped. And almost 94% of them are dropped almost within a month or two after the initial flagging of those individuals.
All right, so in this one statement alone, the 1.5 million figure is dishonest. The 40% figure is dishonest. Why do they have to concoct these figures to advance this all-important goal of more gun control?
Well, I think you exactly said before, he's trying to scare people. You see, wow, 40% of gun sales aren't undergoing background checks. That seems like a scary number. So people want to try to do something about it. If he were to go and say, and 40% of the transfers of guns involve inheritances from parents to kids or gifts within families, I don't think it would have quite the impact that he's saying. Or to go and say 1.5 million, if he were to actually use the correct term, which is initial denials, rather than saying prohibited people, because these people aren't permanently prevented. It's just, people may remember, for example, former...
Hold on, I just want to make clear. So the fact is, 1.5 million people were not denied clearance for weapons.
That's exactly right. So I just give you a simple analogy. People may remember the late Senator Ted Kennedy from Massachusetts. There were 5 times he was prevented from flying because his name was on the don't fly list. I mean, he was eventually able to fly. It would be wrong to say, well, we got 5 people prohibited from flying because they were initially denied being on a flight, counting Kennedy 5 times there. But he shouldn't be, because he eventually did get on a flight.
A very, very important point. We're about to come to a break, but I want the folks to know my next question has to do with the Centers for Disease Control. This may seem like a minor issue, but Obama is issuing a memorandum directing the Centers for Disease Control to research the causes and prevention of gun violence. Now, John Lott, I want to explore this with you because this is yet again an attempt to pervert science into politics. And as I understand it, John Lott, there is a federal law or federal laws that already prevent the CDC from doing this, and Obama seeks to usurp it with an executive order. Let's get into that as soon as I return.
The one-man antidote for liberal media bias, Mark Levin. Call him now at 877-381-3811.
John Lott, Centers for Disease Control. Do we want the Centers for Disease Control that is supposed to really have its area covering diseases and so forth, do we really want them delving into reports on firearms?
No, I don't. But the president paints this as either the Centers for Disease Control gets involved or there won't be any good research that's going to be done on firearms and violence. And my problem is the government just cannot divorce politics from research. We see this all the time. I can give you just a simple example just with the last couple months when you had Hurricane Sandy hit New Jersey and New York. Senator Schumer started making public announcements saying that if NOAA, the National Atmospheric and Oceanographic Center that goes and classifies whether something's a hurricane or not, did not classify the hurricane as a tropical storm, he was going to try to cut their budget because it would affect how much the insurance payments would be to his constituents. And I can give you tons of examples with regard to actual research where politics get involved. Look, there are a lot of academics out there. The government gives lots of money. 80% of academics work for public universities. Most of them only have to teach, 5, 6, 7 hours a week. It's not like they don't have plenty of time to go and do research. All that is government subsidies for research, and people go and work on these types of topics all the time. If anything, we're probably giving too much money for this type of research to begin with, and there's no reason to believe that if it's an interesting question, lots of academics haven't already looked at it.
And you've done research. Have you been asked by the Obama administration to brief anybody? Were you asked by Biden to brief his little phony committee?
No, and I'm not holding my breath. But it's a perfect example. Look, the type of research that we're talking about doesn't involve buying cyclotrons someplace. The data's out there. The government puts out lots of data. You can go and download it. You can run the regressions that we have to run for the statistical tests on our computer. It really is a fairly low-cost process to go and do.
Has the Centers for Disease Control been banned by Congress from doing this anyway?
That's exactly right. And the president is essentially just thumbing his nose at the law that's there. He even signed the bill, the funding bill, which had those provisions in them. He's signed them a couple times because they keep on putting them in each year. And so even something that he signed in the past, he's going to ignore that law.
He has on his list of executive orders nominate an ATF director. You don't need to issue an executive order to nominate an ATF director, do you?
Right. Well, I mean, he's been letting
In other words, he can just go ahead and nominate an ATF director, correct?
Right. You know, the last person he had nominated was a couple years ago, Andrew Travers, and the reason why he ran in trouble, even in a Democratic Senate, even when the Democrats had basically near supermajority control of it, is because Travers is somebody who essentially has come out for all sorts of gun bans in the past.
Yeah, because Obama doesn't just nominate competent bureaucrats or managers or executives. He constantly nominates radicals for all these positions.
That's right.
But it's very clever that it's on his list. I should issue an executive order to order myself to nominate an ATF. And I notice a lot of that kind of crap in here, which is laced throughout in order to try, I think, to camouflage some of the more onerous aspects. For instance, launch a national dialogue led by Secretary Sebelius and Duncan on mental health. Do you have to issue an executive order for that, John Lott?
I would think not.
Don't you just tell your cabinet secretaries, go out there and be propagandists?
Sure. I'm sure you can send them an email or have somebody in the White House send them an email.
What does it mean, provide incentives for school to hire a school resource officer? A school resource officer? Then he's not talking about armed guards who are... What's a school resource officer? We don't know, do we?
No.
It could be somebody in the lunchroom, for all I know, with a school resource officer. And I wouldn't put it past them, given how they larded up the Sandy hurricane bill and so forth. But what does this mean? Direct the Attorney General to review categories of individuals prohibited from having a gun to make sure dangerous people are not slipping through the cracks. What does that mean?
It means that they're probably going to end up using a lot of discretion in determining whether or not somebody deserves to be able to get their guns back or not. I mean, there's already pretty clear rules with regard to, are you on the prohibited list? Are you somebody who has a felony conviction? Are you someone who's had certain types of misdemeanor convictions? Are you someone who's had certain types of mental health problems that have caused you to be involuntarily committed or been adjudicated as having been a threat to yourself or others? If you meet those conditions, then you're not supposed to get your gun back. I don't know what additional things they have the right to do, but it doesn't seem like, unless there's some type of law that gets passed from Congress, they can go and add to that list. The list is very clear on who's a prohibited person to have a gun and who isn't.
Executive Order 12, provide law enforcement, first responders, and school officials with proper training for active shooter situations. It would seem to me local law enforcement, first responders, SWAT teams know more about this than most individuals in the federal government, wouldn't they?
Well, I mean, they're the ones who bear the direct costs and benefits for getting it right. It's their school. It's their.
But I mean, they're there on the scene. I mean, you've seen SWAT in action. I've seen them in action. It's not. Who's going to teach them? The same guys that sold weapons to the Mexican cartels. I mean, this is what annoys the hell out of me right there. There's nothing on here, for instance, where the president is ordering himself, because we have executive orders where the president's ordering himself to make a nomination, ordering himself to order cabinet officials and others not to run another a killer ruse like Fast and Furious.
Well,
I mean, there are things the federal government could stop doing with its own power that might be helpful. For instance, there's nothing on here, I'm sure you would point out, about gun-free zones, that they ought to be outlawed.
No, he would never think of going there on this.
Nothing on here about Hollywood or any of the rest. And by the way, I don't want it on there, First Amendment. But I noticed not a word about Hollywood, because Hollywood is his, that's his mother's milk when it comes to raising money. Not a word on here about TV violence, a movie, not a thing.
Right. Well, when you look at these people who commit these mass shootings, there's a couple things that are clear. One is they're doing this as a way of committing suicide, but they want to commit suicide in a way that's going to get them publicity. And it's chilling to read how they explicitly talk when they leave notes or videos like the Virginia Tech guy did, saying that if they can kill more people, they know they can get more publicity, and how that's a goal in their mind. we could go and talk about First Amendment type things and changing them, but obviously that would violate the First Amendment to go and do that. But there doesn't seem to be any compulsion to going and have the same standard with regard to Second Amendment issues.
Now we're running out of time. I want to hit these things very quickly if we can. Remind us again, what's an assault weapon?
Right.
Is there such a thing? What does that mean?
It's basically a made-up term. What it deals with here are semi-automatic guns, which are essentially one pull the trigger, one bullet comes out. These are not military weapons, despite the president's constant referral today as military weapons, that look like military weapons. So the Bushmaster that was used in Newtown looks like an M16, looks like a weapon the military would use, but in fact it functions exactly the same way as a semi-automatic hunting rifle does.
What's an AR-15? That weapon's been thrown around. What's an AR-15?
Well, it's kind of the generic name for the Bushmaster. It's
a rifle.
Right. It's essentially hunting rifles that look like M16s.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, are they quote unquote automatic? You pull the trigger and a whole lot of bullets come out all at once in a burst?
No, of course not. One pull the trigger, one bullet comes out.
Am I right or wrong in saying that if somebody really gets access to a real, live, honest-to-goodness military weapon, that the federal government has to give permission for that to occur?
Yes, you have to go through special licensing for that.
So you can't just walk into a gun shop and say, I want a real military weapon, a rapid-fire machine gun-type weapon that they use in Afghanistan or whatever. They can't just say, okay, we'll do a 15-minute background check and here you go. Is that correct?
Right. But the thing is, none of these attacks involve those types of weapons. Mm-hmm. And, the president, by constantly referring to military weapons, he's even dropped the term military style now. He used to at least properly call them military style, where the key word was style there. But today, and many of his recent speeches, he just talks about them as being military, trying to get military weapons off the street.
And he talked about Aurora, Colorado. He said, allowed the gunman in Aurora to shoot 70 people, killing 12 in a matter of minutes. As I recall, in Fort Hood, the killer there had pistols. And he killed 13 people, may have been 14, and injured over 30. And he didn't have a quote-unquote military-style weapon, and he had pistols, correct?
Right. Well, look at Europe. The big shooting there, the big shooting in world history right now is the Norwegian one, which occurred in 2011. There were 69 people killed by using pistols, and 110 people were wounded in that attack.
And he used pistols only?
Right.
Mm-hmm. And the truth is, most murder in this country occurs with pistols, doesn't it?
That's right.
Not with AR-15s.
No.
Not with military-style assault weapons, as they say.
I mean, if you look at murders involving all rifles, you're talking about 300 or so. And,
300 a year in the whole nation.
Right.
Do you know there are 200 deaths a year on the New York City subway system?
I'll be careful the next time I'm on it.
According to the Huffington Post, and we know they never lie. Well, John Lott, what do you make of all this? Because this really has absolutely nothing to do with what occurred in Newtown, Connecticut, the mass murder there 4 or 5 weeks ago, and yet that's the impetus, they say, for all this, and has almost nothing to do with all the other examples of mass murder. Am I correct?
Oh, that's exactly right. These things about background checks would have had no impact on the Newtown case. These discussions about assault weapons wouldn't have had any impact on that. And yet, obviously, it's being used to motivate it. My concern is that Obama's rules there are either going to have no effect or actually going to cause problems, are actually going to make it harder for law-abiding citizens to go and defend themselves. I mean, just take something as apparently simple as this universal background checks that he wants to have. There's costs and benefits from all these laws. He ignores the cost. The simple cost for the background checks is about 8% of background checks take 3 days. Another 1% can take months to try to clear up. And the problem with that is, for most people, that's just a simple inconvenience. That's fine. But there's a small group of people who may feel threatened and may feel the need to quickly obtain a gun for self-defense. And if you look at the empirical research on this, you'll find that even a 3-day waiting period has a small effect on crimes, particularly crimes involving women, for rape and assault against women. Maybe there's some X.
I've got to go. But your point is sometimes women or whomever need weapons immediately because they know they're being threatened or they're in a threatening situation.
Exactly. And this and on net, the laws that he wants to have can cause more harm than benefit.
And same with people who need mental health attention. I mean, they may be less likely to get it, and all because of what? They don't even keep statistics on that. All right, John Lott, my friend, as always, it's a pleasure. Thank you. We may have you back soon if that's okay.
Oh, I always appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, God bless you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you've